Alrighty, how's it going, guys? Hank here, right back at you with another video on the Review and Preview Sports YouTube channel. And before we get into anything else, I'd like to give you guys a friendly neighborhood reminder. Please give us a follow on all of our social medias. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Review and Preview Sports. And of course, as always, if you're watching this, please don't forget to hit that big red button down below. Give us a subscribe, give us a like, and of course, please share your comments on down below. Now, this video that I'm going to be doing today is something very new and something that's kind of similar to what I've done in weeks past. And for this week, I'm going to be discussing the New York Rangers. Now, obviously, if you've seen some videos on this channel in weeks or months past, I've given recaps upon this team a few times. I talked about a road trip that I went to in Philadelphia where the Rangers had a comeback win. And I believe I talked a little bit about the Henrik Lundqvist ceremony when he got his number retired. But I was thinking over the course of the past few weeks, and I figured, why not make a video where I talk a little bit more into detail about this team? Because, I've watched a lot of these games. For those of you who've seen me on Review and Preview, you guys know that I'm a hardcore fan of the New York Giants. I co-host Big Blue Avenue with Tom Savetta, and also I host a baseball show called Hitting for the Cycle during the summer, and hopefully Manfred Willing will get to see more of that. But I kind of wanted to talk a little about another team that I follow a lot, and that is the New York Rangers. So for starters, let's talk a little bit about the games that they've had the past few weeks. Now, the Rangers were coming off a two-week break. They beat the Florida Panthers 5-2 on February 1st. They had a week off partially because of the All-Star break and also because the Rangers didn't really lose a lot of games as a result of COVID-19 cancellations. So they got an extra week to rest up. And then they finally got back in action February 15th against the Boston Bruins. And I got to say, this was by far one of the most memorable games I have ever attended in all the years in which I've been a Ranger fan. And look, you knew going into this game, they were going to be very rusty early on. This is a team that hadn't played in 2 weeks, and it showed. They were outshot 8-2. And, again, credit to Igor for not letting this game become a blowout. He had some big saves early on, and he only gave up one goal, which really wasn't his fault at all. It was a turnover from Barclay Goodrow, went into the hands of Charlie Coyle, got the shot off. It was 1-0 Bruins. And, to their credit, the Rangers would pick it up in the second period. Obviously, they couldn't get that equalizer, but, give credit to Jeremy Swayman, the Bruins goalie. He made some big saves, including one on a shot from Adam Fox 2 feet away. But then as we got into the third period, Philip Hedl had a big game-tying goal. He had a shot that went right off of Swayman, bounced back onto the ice, and then Hedl was able to get his own rebound there. Rangers would tie the game. And, as I mentioned, this was one of Igor Shesterkin's best games all season. He made a total of 31 saves if we count the first 3 periods plus overtime. Plenty of them, a number of them were highlight reel worthy, including one that came off of a breakaway of Taylor Hall. And he also had 4 clutch saves on David Pastrnak. This included one in the shootout, and then he also had one in overtime that really prevented disaster from happening. And at the controversial moment of this game happened, though, when Craig Smith of the Boston Bruins was in their zone. He ran over Igor. No penalty was called. However, a scrum happened, and then as Alexei Lafreniere came over to him, he started hitting him in retaliation. And while they did eventually call a penalty on Smith, it wasn't a power play that it should have been. So both of them went to the penalty box. It was essentially what would have been a 4-on-4 penalty had it been a regulation period, but this was overtime. So both of them are in, and, nothing happened. But the crazy thing happened a few minutes later was the concussion spotter saw what happened. He ran onto the ice, took out Igor for concussion safety. Now, personally, I thought the timing of this was bizarre in the sense that, it was during overtime and the Rangers were going to be without their star goalie. And we didn't know if he was going to be out during the game. So obviously Igor was frustrated, and he was visibly, you could see him smash his stick on the glass. But then a funny thing happened. Igor gets cleared to play. As he leaves the tunnel, I have to say this was one of the loudest moments I have ever seen Madison Square Garden. There were a million chants of Igor, Igor. And I have to say, from a personal standpoint, this gave me all sorts of goosebumps and chills, similar to those feelings that I had when a certain number 30 was our goalie for all those years. But then this led to one of the most epic shootouts I have ever seen. After three rounds, it was tied at 2. But then for the next 5, you had an absolute goalie clinic. Lasted until the 9th round. And then Keandre Miller puts an end to it, has an epic tuck-in goal. Game over. Rangers ended up winning. And gosh, it was one of the most insane feelings leaving the Garden. And you know, the Red Wings game was pretty similar. It was another game. Rangers started off slow. They looked very rusty at the beginning. Detroit had one of those fluky goals where Troy Stetcher shot the puck, bounced off of a defenseman, the puck goes in. And it was a weird game because Thomas Greiss of the Detroit Red Wings, while he had a solid game, he had some lucky breaks. There was a post shot by Panarin that did not go in, and had some key saves too. And one of those games that 9 out of every 10 times the Rangers probably would have won. And just when it looked like another one of those snooze fests, Keandre Miller scored a similar tuck-in goal, just like he did in the shootout, tied the game, and then 90 seconds later, this was the second period, Dylan Larkin gets a goal that came off a ricochet. It was shot off the backboard, but Dylan Larkin, credit to him for being in the right place at the right time, finds the open space, gives Detroit the lead. And the crazy part was in the third period, there were so many missed calls. Kevin Rooney got tackled from behind the Detroit net. No call. Gavani Smith cross-checked Julien Gauthier. Also no call on that one. However, Dryden Hunt stepped in and tried attacking him as retribution, but he gets penalized for 2 minutes, and then another one was tacked on for excessive boarding. So the refs clearly were not helping them. And make no mistake, I'm not one of those fans that will sit here and complain about the refs a lot and blame them for a Rangers loss, but that certainly did not help. And it was one of those bad luck moments that really may have cost the Rangers in this. But credit to the Rangers, they fought back. They would get a power play later in the third period. Mika Zibanejad, who had been heating up in the second half, scored a power play goal from what I would pretty much call Ovi's office. The game was tied. However, this one, again, in a continuation of bad puck luck, the Rangers essentially dominated in overtime. They had a lot of good chances, but unfortunately could not come up with the game winner. And then the shootout in the 5th round, Ryan Strome had a wide open net, was not able to put the puck in there, and then Red Wings ended up won. But you know what? This was the Rangers' first loss at MSG to an Eastern Conference opponent all season, believe it or not. So it was just one of those games where bad luck happens. Can't really get too crazy about it. You just move on to the next one. And then we go to the Senators game, which happened last Sunday. It was another game where Igor played lights out. Now, this was a game that I thought the Rangers could have won by more. The Senators were pretty banged up. You had a few guys that were injured, and they're not really a factor in the playoffs, but the Rangers only really could win by a score of 2-1. So it was a little too close for comfort. However, a few things that I want to point out from this game. Ryan Strome redeemed himself. He tied the game not long after Ottawa got a fluky goal to take a 1-0 lead. And then Artemi Panarin. Now, over the course of the season, I've been on record saying that Artemi Panarin hasn't really been shooting the puck enough. And I think that might be the reason why he's scored only 14 goals. Oftentimes, you'll see him with the puck try to force shots to his own teammates and be unselfish, but there have been times where that's come back to hurt him. This time, he shoots the puck, gives the Rangers the lead, and while it was never really a safe game, the Rangers would hold on and win this one 2-1 in a game that, quite frankly, they needed. So we look at the standings. The Rangers have a total of 69 points. They're only 1 point behind the Pittsburgh Penguins for second in the division and 5 behind the Carolina Hurricanes. So overall, they're in pretty good shape for the playoffs and throughout their not bad throughout their first 50 games. And it's the most in this stretch through 50 games since having 71 points in the 2012 season, and they've earned a point in 5 straight games. So they're doing what they have to do, essentially. It's not always looking pretty, but you got to give them credit where credit is due. But some of the main things I want to take away, the defense overall has been really good. Adam Fox continues to be getting a point per game. He's making a strong case for being for having another Norris Trophy season. And in addition to him, you have Jacob Trouba having one of his better seasons, delivering a lot of clean hits and being a good force along the blue line. And then other guys worth mentioning, Zach Jones, who unfortunately got sent down to Hartford. He's making his presence felt, along with rookie Braden Schneider, who has become a similar player in terms of style to Ryan Lindgren, a hard-hitting physical defenseman who's also racked up a few points early on. So I don't see him coming. I don't really see Schneider getting sent down anytime soon. I think he's made a strong impact. And let's face it, I don't think either of those guys are going to be traded in any upcoming deals that the Rangers will make later on in the season. So far, a lot of good along the defense. Igor Shesterkin in goal continues to make the big saves when necessary. And you look at these last 3 games. All 3 of these games, he could have conceivably gotten a shutout, if not for a few bad turnovers here and there, and if not for a few unlucky breaks. He has been absolutely on fire. He has one of the lowest goals against average in the league. It's probably slightly below 200. He has one of the highest win totals on the season, and if he keeps this pace up, not only could the Rangers be a factor in the playoffs, but he could very well be winning a Vezina. So Igor Shesterkin has stolen a lot of games from this season, which is definitely a good thing. However, it also gives me a little bit of flashbacks to years in the early 2010s when the Rangers would win a lot of games with Henrik Lundqvist stealing points here and there. But again, can it be sustainable? Who knows? Maybe he carries them later on, but we'll see. The schedule, and the reason that I really wanted the Rangers to win the Senators game in a bit of a while, because you look at the upcoming matchups. The Rangers have games against division rivals. Now, next week they will be this week they've got a big game coming up on Thursday night against the Washington Capitals at Madison Square Garden. Then they go to Pittsburgh in a game that starts at a weird time, 3:00, and then you have the game against Vancouver shortly afterwards, and then the Vancouver game leads to a 3-game home stretch against teams like the St. Louis Blues and the New Jersey Devils. Blues are a team that are a playoff factor among the West, and the New Jersey Devils, while they're among the bottom 3, they're going to be playing the Rangers stuff because obviously it's a rivalry. What do you expect? But let's look at the Capitals and the Penguins for a second. The Capitals were a team that were a factor in the playoffs early on. They've kind of fallen off a bit, but the one guy you obviously have to watch out for is Alexander Ovechkin. Simply put, he's one of the greatest goal scorers of our generation. You leave him wide open, and it is not going to end well. So that should be an interesting game, and not to mention you still probably have a little bit of the Tom Wilson stuff going on. I would imagine this is their first game back against the Rangers since the incidents that happened at the end of last season. I can only imagine the reception Tom Wilson will get. And then there's the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, the Penguins had a stretch where they won 22 of 26. The question is, has this team peaked too soon? I mean, they still have Sid the Kid, and they still have Evgeny Malkin, and you still have a lot of guys from those cup winners. But there's also a reason a lot of people didn't have this team going far to begin with, because a lot of their core is aging. You don't have everybody left from their past cup wins. And not to mention, there's the issue of Tristan Jarry, who did well during the playoffs a couple years ago, but, now there's also the issue that they could have peaked too soon, and this is the first matchup the Rangers had against the Penguins, so it'll be a really big litmus test early on, but I'm really excited for all these matchups. Now, before I get into anything else regarding the Rangers, a few more newsworthy things to note regarding injuries. Patrick Nemeth played his first game against the Ottawa Senators Sunday night. He was dealing with post-COVID symptoms, so obviously I think that had to have factored in him not playing, and he looked pretty good in that game. And obviously the Rangers are still without Kaapo Kakko, and how they fill that void come the trade deadline remains to be seen, but that's something that we will probably get into later on as I discuss more about the Rangers. However, before I end this brief segment, I do want to touch upon some sad news in the hockey community, and former Rangers coach and general manager Emile Francis passed away last Saturday at the age of 95. And I'm going to get straight to the point here. Emile, you can make a list of a lot of people that are among important figures in Rangers history, but Emile Francis has to be along the top of that list. Now, why do I say that? As I mentioned, he was a general manager from 1964 to 1976. And during this time, he was also mostly the head coach, off and on from 65 to 75 during that time. And this was during a time where the Rangers had one of their best stretches in team history. He led the Rangers to 9 consecutive playoff appearances during that time. And up until he became the general manager, the Rangers had been mired in mediocrity. They had a lot of losing seasons and only 4 playoff appearances that did not result in a playoff series victory. And he turned the Rangers around by bringing in guys such as Jean Rattel, Rod Gilbert, Brad Park, Vic Hadfield. And these are just a few great players that they had that helped the Rangers make some deep playoff runs. And included in that run was the Stanley Cup Finals appearance. However, in addition to that, he had played sparingly as a Rangers goalie in the late 40s and the early 50s. He wasn't a starter, but fun fact, he was actually credited as one of the first goalies to use a glove in the shape of a first baseman's mitt. He had spent most of his time in the minor leagues for the AHL and WHL, but remember, this was at a time where the NHL had only six teams, so didn't have too much of a career in the National Hockey League, but had a great impact as their GM. And before he came to the Rangers, he was actually hired as their minor league coach. He was supposed to coach the minor league affiliate for the Chicago Blackhawks. However, they never agreed with him to a deal, but the Rangers came swooping in, offered him a job, and he did a good job in developing some of their talent in the minor leagues. And then going up to the Rangers, as I mentioned, they had a stretch of 9 consecutive playoff appearances, Stanley Cup appearance in 72. And the one unfortunate fact about that era was that they were unable to win the Stanley Cup. But if you listen to any interviews that Emile Francis had about his time as the Rangers coach, he looked at it very fondly. He enjoyed his time. He essentially turned the Rangers around after a really rough period. And if you ask any player living from that era how they felt about Emile Francis, they would tell you that they wish they could have won a cup for him. And, it really speaks volumes to his character. And one other thing that I want to mention before I end this video, I think another reason he was important to hockey in New York was he founded the Metropolitan Junior Hockey League and promoted hockey for kids around the New York tri-state area, in addition to organizing youth clinics around the area. And included in this development was future Rangers such as Brian Mullen and Nick Fatiou played there. And needless to say, he basically grew hockey in the area, and another big reason why he was important for the game. And beyond just youth hockey and beyond the fact that the Rangers got a lot better during his tenure, he really had a big impact on the Rangers. And there's a lot more about him that I really could talk about, time permitting, but I think if you really want to learn about his era, I would strongly recommend reading this book, We Did Everything But Win. A lot of guys in that era, it covers pretty much everything from that era. Everyone that played for him will pretty much speak positively. And again, as I said, speaks volumes, and he will definitely be missed. And hopefully the Rangers do something to honor him by putting a patch somewhere, whether it be on the uniform or the helmets. And I personally wish he would have gotten a banner up in the rafters, but that's really a story for another day. But in any event, rest in peace, Emile Francis. Thank you again for the impact you made, not just on and among the NHL, but for the New York tri-state area. He also wound up being the president of the St. Louis Blues and the Hartford Whalers. But again, I'd love to get into more about that, but that would have to come in a separate video. But thoughts and prayers go out to the family of Emile Francis and all those who were among his friends. But that'll wrap it up for this video. I want to thank you guys again for tuning in to my first ever New York Rangers short video segment. And again, if you like what you saw and if you have any more opinions regarding the New York Rangers, I would encourage you to please give us a follow on all of our forms of social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Review and Preview Sports. And of course, for those of you on YouTube, please don't forget to hit that big red button down below. Give us a subscribe, give us a like, and please give us a comment. What did you think about this Ranger stretch? Do you think Igor Shesterkin will win the Vezina? Do you think Adam Fox is still a Norris Trophy candidate? How do you think the Rangers should address their needs among their bottom six? Who do you think we should trade for? Do you think the defense needs to be beefed up? Who do you want as right wing depth? Who do you want as center depth? I would love to talk to you guys in the comments, but folks, that'll wrap it up for this episode. And I'll talk to you guys again later, at whether it be the end of this home stretch or after some of these games, again, whether it be at the end of the home stretch or whether it be after the Canucks game on Sunday. But until next time, I'll talk to you guys soon. I'm Hank and Dichter, and I'll see you guys later.